Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I am honored to have Mr. Jake Hamburger with me. Jake is he's a master of the world of franchising, and we're going to hear about that today. But he's with a company called FranPath. And what you're going to hear in his journey today is a little bit about how when you can make connections with people, opportunities will present themselves. So, Jake, thanks so much for being on today, my man.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Phil. This is awesome. I'm a longtime listener of the pod, so excited to get on now on this side of the table. So excited to be a guest on the show.
You bet. So to start your journey, grew up in good old Hastings, Nebraska. So talk a little bit about growing up in, we'll call it small town Nebraska, but and in that environment and work ethic and sports and just some of the things that you learned at an early age.
Yeah, no, it's definitely small town USA out there in Hastings. So graduated with a big group of 50 individuals. So very small class, and but I had the opportunity to participate in a lot of different things. So obviously small school, everybody's involved in everything. So kind of played everything, was involved in extracurricular activities, and just had a really good group that I ran around with, and I was lucky enough, fortunate enough to have a lot of success in high school athletics. Was a part of two state championship teams, and had a little bit of a unique coaching situation. Basketball was kind of the primary sport for me, and I played for four different coaches in 4 years, which is pretty unheard of at the high school level. But one of the coaches was he's kind of a legend in the state, is Mike Trader. And he was in with us for really a year, and then he was kind of involved a little bit for the second year, which was my senior year. And having the ability to play for somebody like that, and then Kevin Asher was the other one that really played a big factor in my high school basketball career. Really instilled a lot of things that I carried with me well past high school. But thinking back, the things that really stick out to me was, two-a-days mid-season, and, 5 a.m. practices with Coach Trader. But at the end of the day, when you're going through it, it feels like it's never going to end. But, when you get to the end of the journey and you've got two state championships and, a lot of memories and, a lot of things that kids always, dream about, it was a great experience. And that really took me to the next level, which was playing at the collegiate level. And I did that, was fortunate enough to do that for 5 years at two different NAI schools. And then that kind of led to post college. But, Hastings is a great community full of great people. But having the ability to play for some really good coaches helped instill a lot of things, the hard work, the attention to detail, the preparation, and, kind of failing to prepare is preparing to fail, and all those different things that I still carry with me today.
I love it. Now, you very casually just dropped, hey, we won two state championships in there. So one thing that I would love to hear a little bit about, as I recall those teams in your era, it was not hey, we've got one really good player and we're just riding the coattails to see where we can go. It was really like a team. There's five guys that all were good, but it wasn't, hey, if this guy goes for 50, we're winning. If the rest of the team doesn't matter. So talk a little bit about that. And once again, I know there's different coaches, so maybe there was different ways that that was articulated, but talk about maybe putting the winning for the team above, individual accolades amongst any one player.
Yeah, we had a very unique situation, especially being at a small D1 high school. We had 10 guys that could play. Not 10 guys that could fill a roster, like 10 guys who could play. Our second five could have started at a lot of schools in the state at that level, and maybe even at a little bit of a higher level.
Yeah.
One of the things that, I think we were seniors. We beat the Class B state champion with Ralston, who was loaded with three D1 players. And, we beat them at the Heartland Event Center. And, we did it with a bunch of guys that just love to compete. A lot of times our practices were more difficult than the games that we played because of how much talent was on the floor at every given practice. So It was very unique in the sense that we had a lot of, I think we had 4 guys that averaged double digits, all kind of in that 10 to 16 point range. We had a handful of guys that were in the 6 to 10, 6 to 11 type points per game. So we just had a really spread out team with guys that love to compete and love to play for each other. And that was something, we played together since we were young. I think that was another thing, that one of the benefits of the small school, small community is I grew up with all my teammates playing with them from first grade on. And so we were very familiar with each other. There was a lot of built-in trust. There was a lot of just shared sacrifice and shared success. And it didn't really matter who was the leading scorer or who was receiving all state act. It was more about what are we doing as a team and what are we doing for our school and our community. And that was trying to hang banners, which, we were fortunate enough to do a couple times.
I love it. So as you decide to go, and play collegiate sports, collegiate basketball at that, as you mentioned, 2 different universities that you end up at, but, one of them was maybe, "Hey, I'm leaving," and one was maybe, "I'm more coming home." Talk a little bit about, that dynamic for you as, I'm sure, there was a lot of people that wanted you to just stay local from the get-go.
Yeah, yeah, and it was one of those things that as a kid growing up in a small town, I just wanted to see something different. I wanted to
Yeah.
experience something different. I wanted to see a new school, see a new city, meet new people who weren't all from right there in my area in Hastings. And so I went to Morningside College up in Sioux City, Iowa. I was there for 2 years. Great experience. Still some of my really close friends were Morningside Mustangs, and played for a great coach up there in Jim Sykes. And my freshman roommate was Trent Miller, who is the head coach at Morningside. And I still stay in touch with him and love seeing the success that he's had and just continuing to build the program. They're constantly in the national tournament, making runs at the end of the year, and so did that, and had a great experience up there. Ultimately, just I don't think it was the right fit, from a basketball standpoint, which, we see happen all the time,
Yep.
even more now than ever before in terms of the transfer portal and everything that comes with that. Ended up going back to Hastings College where I finished out, played for Lance Creech for a couple of years and then played for Bill Gavers, who I competed against at the high school level when he was coaching at Grand Island Central Catholic. Went back and played with a really good group of guys at Hastings, and, we had some success. We, were kind of bitten by the injury bug. The 2 years that I was there, we had some really key pieces to our team who went down with season-ending injuries, which was tough. But 20-win seasons, and we had some success. And college athletics is, it doesn't matter the level that you're at. I mean, it is a full-time commitment, and it is something that definitely prepares you for life after sports, and having to, manage your time and having to manage, what goes into being really good at whatever it is your craft is. And, in college, it was basketball, and it's a lot of time commitment. It's a lot of after hours and, a lot of time in the weight room and on the court and practices and all that stuff. And so it doesn't matter the level. It's a great experience to be able to compete at the collegiate level. And it, I think it really helped me prepare for life after sports and that professional career.
I love it. So, life after sports, we're noticing a theme that you love basketball. At what phase in the career did you decide, hey, I'm going to transition into and look to coach after school?
I always wanted to coach and teach. My grandpa was a coach and a teacher. My dad was, initially before that, he jumped into business with my mom and took over the family business. He was a coach and teacher. And so I've got memories dating way back to when I was younger, riding on the bus, with the teams and just being around the high school athletes and always wanting to be a water boy and just, be around the guys. So I always knew I wanted to coach and teach. So when I went to college, that was the path from day one, was education. And so right out of college, I took my first job at Papillion La Vista South here in Omaha, and was an English teacher. I was on the girls' side the first year with Andy Gerles, great coach, and someone I still follow. And then I was with Joel Heiser on the men's side my second year, and really enjoyed. I mean, I love teaching, love coaching. I always tell people, like, I would go back and I would teach in a heartbeat. I love the junior age. I taught junior English, so it was a really impressionable age, and just loved it. And then I had an opportunity after my second year to jump into the college level coaching. And it's an industry where you got to have an in. You got to get your foot in the door somehow. I initially tried to do it out of college, and just didn't get any bites to the letters I was writing, the emails that I was sending. Was looking for like a GA position, and I just couldn't find it. And so I took the teaching job, and but after my second year of teaching, I got a phone call from Bill Gavers, who I played for at Hastings, and he said, "Hey, I'm looking for an assistant. Would love for you to be that guy." And so I took the opportunity and moved back to Hastings, and was Coach Gaber's assistant, and got to throw myself into really everything at that level, at the NII level
Yeah.
as an assistant. As you know, I mean, you're doing everything. I mean, you're doing the laundry, you're doing the recruiting, you're doing the game planning, you're doing the film, you're working guys out, you're planning practice. You're doing everything. And so
Yeah.
it was a great opportunity for me to kind of dip my toe into the world of coaching, but really not even dip my toe. I was really jumping in head first, of just learning everything that there is to know at the college level from a coaching standpoint. And it was really late in the year. Who knew in the moment? I went out to work a camp at the University of Oregon. Had an opportunity to go out there, and went out and worked the camp. And it was the second or third day of the camp. Coach Altman, who's a small town Nebraska guy, he was gracious enough to give me an hour of his time right
Huh.
during the camp. And I had my notebook and a whole, list of questions. And I thought we were going to be meeting in his office. So I'm mentally prepared to sit down in the office. I've got my notebook, I've got all my questions. I'm going to pick his brain. And I've always tried to take the approach of, I'm just going to find the people who are the best at whatever it is that I'm trying to learn, or whatever I'm trying to do. I'm going to pick their brain. I'm going to learn from them, and I'm going to make it my own, and kind of just copy what they do, but I'm going to make it my own.
Yeah.
And so we get there, and I meet him down, during lunch, meet him down the court. And he was like, "Hey, I hope you don't mind. I got to run back to my house, and I got to take my dog out." He was like, "Do you mind doing this kind of conversation in the car?" And so I was a little thrown off, so I had to kind of ditch the notebook. And long story short, we end up, spending an hour just talking, picking his brain. At the end of the conversation, he asked, he goes, "Have you ever thought about being a coach at this level?" And I said, "Well, of course I have, but just never right time, never had the opportunity." And but he kind of left the conversation to saying, "Have you ever thought about it?" And I could
Yeah.
tell he was, interested. So I go out on the road that summer recruiting, and I ran into him like two or three times. And a couple of those times he was like, "Hey, come grab a bite to eat with, me and my staff." And so that those conversations, the first conversation initially, and then the couple times that I saw him out on the road, ultimately led to me getting an opportunity to join his staff, where I primarily did player development and video coordination. So a lot of video, a lot of scouting reports. And I was on, the staff with the Oregon Ducks for 2 years, and had an opportunity to be a part of a Sweet 16 run, and was a part of, coaching some, current NBA players, future or past NBA players as well, some guys that aren't in the league anymore. But that led me to another Division II school at Pittsburgh State, and but had a great 4 years, in college athletics, trying to kind of maneuver my way. And COVID really rocked the boat for me, and I'm sure we'll get to that. But my 4 years in college coaching were, phenomenal. A lot of really great memories, and still a lot of great relationships that I still keep in touch with. So
I love it. So, as a player and as a coach, were around some very successful basketball coaches, and I think, you made the comment, "Hey, I learned from each of them, and then I would take certain things and make it my own." What I guess I would ask is, specifically, time with Coach Altman, Coach Trader, some of the guys that have had really long and good successful careers, were there certain things that stood out to you about one, how they, treated you and how, maybe the coaching staff came together, and then two, their interaction with the players that you felt like, man, this is really something that adds to the ability to have success.
Yeah, I think, the things that really stick out to me, one of them is attention to detail. The best coaches that I was ever around had a tremendous amount of attention to detail. And kind of right alongside that is that they demanded excellence every single day. It's never a situation with those, individuals who are great at what they do that they decide, yeah, you know what, I'm just going to take today off. I'm just going to let the team, not get a defensive stance today. I'm not, they don't need to touch the line on these 10 and 60s. I'm going to just give them the benefit of the doubt here. We're just going to move on to the next drill. Like it was always, they demanded excellence. They held the teams accountable. They held themselves accountable. I think that's where it starts. They held their staff accountable. Those are the two things that I think really stuck out to me is the attention to detail and then just the accountability factor of holding their teams to a certain standard.
Yeah.
One of the things about Coach Altman, and he does it year after year after year. I don't know the exact number of seasons off the top of my head, but he's won 20 games. I mean, every year that he's been at Oregon, and I think he's been at Oregon for maybe 15 years, maybe 16 years, and to do it year in and year out, especially in today's climate, is incredible. But his teams always play their best basketball. It's like you get past the first of the year with the Dane Altman team.
Yeah.
January, they start clicking. February, they're rolling. And it doesn't matter if they had a really bad start to the season, they will be a team that you don't want to play in March.
Yep.
And it's like the sun coming up in the morning. It's like it is going to happen, but it's because Coach Altman comes to practice the exact same on January 15th that he comes on October 27th. He's the same guy. He walks onto the court every single day wearing the exact same thing, clapping, keeping the energy. And it doesn't matter if you're on a 2-game losing streak, you're on your 5-game winning streak. He's the same guy. And I think that consistency and that, level of expectation for what he demands of his teams, it never changes. And so the team doesn't go up and down like sometimes the coaches go up and down, or even business leaders, emotional business leaders, their teams and their sales will go up and down. He's the same guy on day one as he is on, day 200. So it's something that there's so many crossovers between sports and business and, sports and, the professional world, I'm sure the finance world as well. I mean, and
Yeah.
so I take a lot of the things that I learned during my time at Oregon and even my time as a player that I still use today. And so but it was a great experience, and he is one of the best to ever do it. He was a great guy to work for.
I love it. Now, as you're at Oregon and you're kind of navigating the college ranks, I think that's always a difficult uh next step. What's the right one, right? Is it better to go get a higher up role on a coaching staff at a smaller school or a lower division? Is it better to stay inside of a power 4 power 5 conference but maybe not have as big of a role? So talk a little about what led you to Pitt State from Oregon.
Yeah. So, I mean, really, what led me to Pitt State after Oregon was, I was done, my 2 years was over. I was a part of the, really the video coordinating and the player development, but my title was really a GA. And so I was getting my master's, completed that from Oregon. 2 years was up, and it was time to move on. Coach Altman has traditionally kept a pretty lean staff. And so it was time to move on. And so I was, out searching for jobs, hunting jobs. As a lot of you got a lot of college coaches on this podcast, and one
Yep.
of my good buddies, Justin Bailey, was on, and we worked together at Pitt State. And in the college coaching world, you're always kind of looking for the next step.
Yep.
That was one of the things that it was fun, but it was always stressful. Everybody's always trying to climb the ladder. From a financial standpoint, it can be tough when you're at the lower levels. And so you're always trying to elevate yourself, not only from just a position standpoint, but also from a financial standpoint, especially as people get older, they start having families, wives. And so that's what led me to Pitt State. And I worked for a guy by the name of Kim Anderson, who, was a well-respected Division II coach, won a national championship at Central Missouri, coached for 3 years at the University of Missouri. And so I was really trying to align myself with a quality coach.
Yeah.
I think looking back on my 4 years and, like I said, we'll jump into kind of life after college athletics, but looking back, I think if I was to provide any advice to somebody who's trying to climb the ladder within college athletics, to your question, I would say it's probably more important to align yourself with great coaches and great people. That will ultimately lead you to a better position, a better school, a higher paying position, because if you just surround yourself with great people, it will work out rather than you trying to just chase the next title or the
Yep.
next university. That can be a really difficult, uh, that could be a
A
really
really
difficult
difficult.
life. And I think the biggest thing is to surround yourself with great people, and things will kind of take care of itself. The one that really sticks out to me was Ben McCollum. It was at Pitt State. He was the head coach at Northwest Missouri State. I'm sitting there looking at his staff now, and he's got two or three guys that they were at Northwest with him. And
Yep.
those guys were making no money, working on his staff at Northwest, winning a ton of games, winning national championships. And now they're on staff at Iowa, making a lot of money.
Yeah.
And that happened in about 18 months,
Yeah.
24. I mean, but by the time he went to Northwest, to Drake, to Iowa, there wasn't a lot of time in between there. And that's to the point that I just like surrounding yourself with guys like Ben McCollum, things will take care of themselves and things will work out because guys like that are who you want to surround yourself with and you want to learn from.
That's good, man. I love it. So as you mentioned, after about 4 years of coaching collegiately, COVID and hey, what does the landscape of athletics look like? And what does the landscape of the world look like? Starts to create maybe there's an opportunity to transition into a different line of work. So talk a little bit about kind of the ending with Pitt State and then, what's next.
Yeah. So COVID kind of rocked the boat for me, like it did for a lot of people. But I can still remember sitting in my office in Pittsburgh, Kansas, and having a whole slate of state tournaments that I was about to go to for recruiting, and they just kept getting canceled one by one. And my boss, Coach Anderson, walked in, and he was like, "Hey, buddy, you go home." He was like, "I have no idea what's going to happen." He was like, "I don't know if you're going to get furloughed, if you're going to get laid off." He's like, I have no clue." Um, and I knew, kind of long-term trajectory in college athletics. You're moving around, every year, every couple years, and it can be hard on a family. And I saw so many good friends who, went down that path, and they did it because they loved it, but there was definitely some sacrifice. Just like, anything that's worthwhile is going to come with some sacrifice. And ultimately, what happened was, a really good connection, two really good connections of mine, two people that I consider mentors connected me with the individual who started the nation's largest franchise development company. And so I was in Omaha playing golf, and me and the guy who I was with, we were just kind of brainstorming, who could he help connect me with to help me, navigate possible opportunities in the business world. And I didn't really want to go back to teaching at that time. I kind of wanted to do something a little bit different. And it wasn't, before maybe hole 15, 16 that he was like, "I know exactly who you need to talk to." And, guy's name's Ryan Zink. And he was like, "You need to call him." I called him and I actually extended my trip. He was able to meet with me the next day. And so I extended my trip, stayed in Omaha for another night, went to his office, and we talked for, an hour, hour and a half. And there were so many things that aligned from college recruiting to franchise development. And so he obviously is sitting there looking at me thinking this guy's got no clue, about business. I always joke and say, like, I used to think a P&L was a pick and lob. But he saw that I aligned with, their values, their culture, relationship building. I always tell, like, I never sold franchises. It was always a situation where you got to try to find the right fit.
Yeah.
Franchise ownership can be life changing, but it can also be, a bad situation if you get into the wrong one. And so I
Yeah.
was always trying to align people with the right fit. Just like in college athletics, you're trying to align the player to the
Yep.
right fit. And if you're selling your program in a way that is salesy, it's probably not a good situation. You want to educate people on what it is that you guys do at that program, just like I was educating people on the franchise ownership opportunities and seeing if it was a good fit. So there was a lot that aligned, and I've had a lot of success in the industry, and elevated myself to different positions, and now with a company called FranPath, where I'm on the other side of the fence. But it was, yeah, the stars aligned. And again, who knew in the moment that a conversation with a mentor would turn into an opportunity to jump into franchising?
So, talk a little bit about that with the mentor in that conversation. I think for so many people, they either don't have a mentor, so maybe talk a little bit about how to create, relationships with mentors. But then secondarily is like trusting the mentor. All right, you think I could be a good fit here. You think I could do that. I'm willing to take the step because of your belief in me. So talk a little about those two elements, creating good relationships with potential mentors, but then also being willing to trust in their opinion about you.
Yeah, and this will even come totally full circle here, because the two individuals that I mentioned, one of them, DJ Rezak and Brian Cobbs, two Omaha guys. Um, I got a phone call from Mike Trader when I was coaching and teaching at Papio South, and he called me. He said, "Hey, Jake, I've got some kids that want to be trained." They were middle school kids at the time. One of them was Brian's son, and the other one was DJ's son. And so I used to meet them at 6 a.m. and I used to train them before school. And so I'm connected by a former coach who just knew, okay, I aligned with Coach Trader. I was a hard worker. I studied film. I stayed after practice to get extra work in. I was always trying to improve as a player. I stuck it out and made it through Coach Trader, because he is a very demanding coach. Not everybody makes it through.
Yeah.
And so he connected me with these two individuals. I ended up training their kids for when I trained Max and Dom, until they were graduated. So, 3, 4 years, I ended up going on and training two of DJ's twins who now play football at Notre Dame. And so this relationship with these two individuals was over the course of 4, 5, 6 years. And they just saw how I approached the training of their kids who were middle schoolers, a practice plan and intentionality around the training sessions. And we just developed a relationship over time. That's where the relationship kind of started and what it evolved to. And now they're two individuals who I still keep in touch with. And I mean, I trust them with everything. I mean, these are guys that, they would not, I really believe they would not lead me in the wrong direction. They've got my best interest in mind, just like I had their kids' best interest in mind when I was training them when they were coming up. And so I'm somebody who I kind of live by I never burn bridges. I try to do everything I can, and because you never know when you're going to need them. You never know when you need to cross that bridge. And so, what I did over the course of 4, 5, 6 years with their kids led back to them being willing to say, "Hey, I put my stamp on this guy, even though he's got no experience in franchising, he's got no experience in business, but he would be somebody who would be a good person to add to your team," and it worked out. So really full circle moment of just kind of like how the stars aligned to get me to where I am today. But I think from a mentor standpoint, being inquisitive
Mm.
and picking people's brains is probably the one thing that I would say has led me to where I am. It's really easy to get into a room and just talk about yourself, talk about what you've done, talk about what you're going to do. I think there's a lot of value in just asking questions. And asking questions and shutting up and letting people who are smarter than you talk, that will help people understand what you're about more than you telling them. Is asking the right questions and showing them that you know what questions to ask, you're on the right path in terms of the information that you're trying to gather. That's what got me to Oregon. That's what got me to Pitt State. That's what got me to franchise fast. Like it's what's gotten me to every place that I've ever been is just asking questions and trying to learn from people who are smarter than I am.
I love it. Now, for you on, stepping into the business world, to your point, there's a lot of correlations, but it's also 100% brand new industry. So talk a little bit about, getting started and then truly talk about, the world of franchising. I think for a lot of people, um, you know, things that they hear is, oh, that's passive income or, oh, like, hey, I can just put money into this and then let the business run and I don't have to really work very hard. I just got to make sure that someone else is showing up. So
Yeah.
about, the actual world of franchising and then also, talk about stepping into a new industry.
That's what guys like you are for. Is give money to Phil and let him go to work with it, and you don't need to do anything other than check in with every once in a while and see how much it's growing. That's what you're for.
That's right.
No, but franchising and I've been in franchising now for about 6 years. And my wife and we've owned bought a franchise about 3 years ago. She left corporate America. We started that. We had a general manager. She was running it kind of, 20 to 30 hours a week. I still was doing my job full time. I'm an active investor and co-founder in a franchise brand. So I'm involved in the industry a lot. And so in just 5, 6 years, I've really, completely thrown myself in the industry and it's a really unique space, that everybody knows about, but people don't really know about it. They see Chick-fil-A, they see McDonald's, they see Subway, and they just think, okay, that's franchising. And it's not. At any given point, there's 4,000 active franchise brands. I've got access to about 700 of them, that I'm able to put my clients in front of now. But from a franchising standpoint, business is not passive. There's a phrase in franchising, you can run a franchise as a semi-absentee owner or an absentee owner. That's not the case. I don't subscribe to that. I used the phrase executive model. And for the right brand, you can run it as an executive model where you work on the business, not in the business. You hire a general manager to run the day to day. You're going to spend time working on the back end, building your team, managing the manager. And there can be a ton of benefit to that, for the right person. For other people, it's a way for them to escape, the corporate handcuffs and the corporate 9 to 5, and they can jump into something with the playbook fully put together for them, and they just execute the playbook. And that's what really resonated for me. Franchising's great for some, it's not good for others. But the fact that you can have access to a playbook, you don't have to start from ground zero or from day one. You're really starting from, day 1,000. If the brand's
Right.
been around for 3, 4 years, they've gone through the pain points, they've gone through the obstacles. You can learn from people who have made mistakes or people who have had success. And you can do what they're doing that's been successful and don't do what they're doing that hasn't been successful. It really resonated with me and kind of how I've always gone about things is find people who are good at something and copy them and do what they do and make it your own. And that's exactly what franchising provides is it provides a playbook. It provides ongoing coaching from the support team. It provides technology that's already set up, marketing, sales, tech, everything that you need to run a business. You just have to go out there and put the work in, which can be hard, but again, nothing worthwhile comes without sacrifice. But that's exactly what the franchising world is. It's an opportunity for somebody to jump into business ownership for themselves, in all sorts of industries: home service, brick and mortar fitness, health and wellness, food, kitchens, bathrooms, gutters, roofs. I mean, you name it, there's probably a franchise for it. But it's a system that's got the playbook in place and you just go and execute it.
Now, just thinking about, your childhood, it sounded like parents were, well, mom was in an entrepreneurial world, dad joins the mom in the entrepreneurial world. So you saw the business and business development and all the headaches that can come with, starting a
Yeah.
bit or running a business. So talk a little bit about maybe the differences you see between that example or, somebody starting in business and then somebody taking over. And to your point earlier, hey, you got to, you're starting on third base from a standpoint of you already have 3 years proof of concept, but doesn't mean that it's easier. It's just different levels of hard or different things are hard, right?
For sure. And I mean, I'm thinking the business that, my family's been in for as long as I've been alive, has been, it's a flower shop back in Hastings, Nebraska. They just celebrated 70 years. Second generation business, soon to be third generation. My sister and her husband are going to be taking it over. And it's been cool to see the business evolve. But at the same time, I know right now they are working through a website switch, and some technology that they're trying to implement just to improve efficiency. And it's an undertaking. You got to go out there and you got to research all the different avenues for website and for the technology specific to the flower industry. And you've got to go do all that research. You got to spend that money. You might spend the money and it might not work and it might not turn out the way you want it. And then you feel like you've just flushed 5 grand, 10 grand down the drain, and you got to go back to square one and you got to do it again. And you've got nobody that you can really talk to of like, hey, I mean, you can reach out to other small mom and pop flower shops and ask them what they use, but that's not really the industry. Whereas in franchising, yeah, I pick up the phone and call another franchise owner within the system and be like, hey, I want to try this. Have you done it before? Or I could post on the Facebook wall and I could get 50 comments of like, here's what we did. Here's what we did. Don't do this, do this. And so it's an easy access to information. And I think that's what is very different about the mom and pop single business versus the franchise business. There's pros and cons to both, but I think for somebody who is wanting to jump into business ownership, but maybe doesn't know exactly what they want to go into, franchising is a great industry to look at and at least explore. You never know what you never know what you're going to come up with if you have a conversation with somebody who knows something about franchising.
Yeah.
That's what I did, and I've seen the lives changed over the course of my 6 years in franchising. But I think at the end of the day, the nuts and bolts of it is business ownership provides freedom, it
Yeah.
provides flexibility. My parents were at every event that I ever participated in. It was because they own their own business and they controlled their calendar. They control what they got to go to, and they also had to do things on Sundays. So like there is that give and take, but it provided flexibility and it provided a great life for my siblings and I, the flexibility that it brought. And now I'm excited to be able to do that within the franchising space of helping families get to that after spending 10, 15, 20, 25 years in corporate America where they never got to be at their kids' events. Now they get to have that through franchise ownership.
I love it. Now, if you know this, great. If you don't, I'm putting you on the spot.
Okay.
Is there statistics on like percentage of, franchises that start and 5 years later are still in business relative to somebody who says, hey, Phil's got this new idea. I'm going to go, rent some space and start a business, and 5 years down the road, my level of success?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a cyclical nature to brands. I think that I don't have the exact statistics off the top. I think I read from a food standpoint, like 7 to 10 years. You think back on like a brand like Chipotle. Like you think about how long that brand has been around. It's been, I would say, about 7-ish, 8-ish years. I guess we could look it up and fact check it, but there will likely be something like a Chipotle that comes out. I think about the pizza concept. I think it's called Mod Pizza. It's a very similar Subway, Chipotle type assembly line, putting the food together, putting it in the oven, making the pizza. And it's kind of a made to order type setup. But I think from a food standpoint, I think it's about 7 to 10 years. But from just an overall franchise standpoint, I think the cyclical nature to it is more about finding the brands that have the right founder, the right leadership team, the right infrastructure. Just like anything, there's good brands and there's bad brands. And that
Yep.
was one of the biggest driving forces for me to move from, and I kind of use the analogy of like a real estate agent because most people understand that you've got the buyer's agent, you've got the seller's agent.
Yeah.
And in the franchise development world, I was really representing the seller. I
Yeah.
was representing the brands that I was assigned. I didn't get to choose the brands that I was assigned. I just kind of get what you get. And the company that I work for, traditionally had really good brands that they vetted out and brought on to their portfolio of brands. But I saw some bad ones and I saw some good ones. I was probably a part of, 13-ish brands from like a very intimate, worked on the brands from a development standpoint. And then I probably saw 50 to 75 brands in terms of brand recruitment. And
Yeah.
I really took all those brands and what do the brands have that, the good brands, what do they have? The bad brands, what do they have? And now that really drove me to the other side of the table where now I really represent the buyer. And so I get to choose based on my expertise on what do these good brands, what do they have from an infrastructure standpoint? Because those are the brands that are going to be around for a long time. They've got the track record, they've got the systems and processes, they got the leadership team to help grow the system. Because at the end of the day in franchising, brands are only successful if their franchisees are successful because
Yeah.
franchise brands make their money on royalty. So they are going to take a percentage of revenue. And if the franchisees are all failing, they're not making any money. So they've got to have successful franchise owners. And so that's what really drives that relationship between franchisor and franchisee. And so I use, all the experiences I have to make sure that the brands that I put in front of my clients are the ones that have those characteristics that are going to lead to long-term success.
I love it. Now, on the front end of that, because to your point, you're trying to find a good match, right? It's not like I'm selling you a vehicle and I'll never talk to you again. So whether the vehicle works out or not, it's indifferent. It's like, no, we're kind of attached at the hip here. My success or an element of my financial success is dependent upon you. Are there a lot of like personality, exams or tests that people are given to like match it up? Is it more like one-on-one interviews? Are you the liaison between these two and just say, hey, you just got to trust me that I, have vetted them well and I believe that what I know about you will fit well? Or talk a bit about that process.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. So what I do kind of on my end is I spend time meeting with my clients, two, three, four times before we even get brands in front of that individual. And so I spend a lot of time learning about my clients, what's important to them, what business characteristics are important to them. Do they want to work nights and weekends? Do they want to employ 50 individuals? Or do they want to employ 5 individuals? Do they want something that's got a brick and mortar component to it? Or do they want something they can run out of their house? And there's a lot of things that we look at from just a business standpoint on what's important to them. And then I take all that information and I spend a couple hours per client on just looking at the brands that I have and matching all those characteristics with the brands that I know fit.
Yeah.
We do talk about industry. We talk about, are you interested in health and wellness? Are you interested in fitness? Are you interested in home service? Are you interested in food? And I take all that information and I match them to, usually 5 brands. And I present those 5 brands to the client. And I'd say 80 to 90% of the time, we hit it out of the park and we find 3 brands that they jump into the process with. But once they jump into the process, they are jumping into the brand's process. So I've got my process. They are jumping into the brand's process. And every brand is going to do things a little bit differently. But
Yeah.
they're going to take that individual through a series of phone calls and it's a mutual interview process. The client's interviewing the brand and the brand is interviewing the client. Because again, it goes back to the brands are only successful if their franchisees are successful. And the brands that are good, they know the type of person that they're looking for.
Yeah.
Back to the recruiting thing. It's like the programs who are good, they know the type of player that they need to be successful. And that's that's what's happening during that franchise discovery process is that client is going through the process with that brand. Some brands will have them fill out a personality assessment. Some brands won't, but they're probably having 6 to 10 Zoom calls with that brand They're also spending time talking to current franchise owners. They're talking to the leadership team. They're going to that brand's headquarters to spend a day or two with the brand and that team before they are awarded. That's the other kind of misconception is people are like, well, yeah, if I want to buy a franchise, I'll just write a check and buy a franchise. That's not how it works. People are awarded franchise territories. And so after that discovery day or campus visit, whatever you want to call it, that brand is going to say, Phil, you fit. We want to award you three territories or, whatever you're looking for. We want to award that to you. And at that point, you guys are kind of saying, okay, we're going to get married for the next 10 years or longer based on whatever the length of the contract is. And now you become a franchise owner. And so it's a process that usually takes, I'd say 6 to 10 weeks. But it is a process that requires a lot of conversations and vetting on both sides to figure out if it is a good fit.
I love it. Now, in your transition to FranPath, I always think it's always harder to leave something when something's going well, right? When things aren't going well, it's really easy to be like, yeah, I mean, anything sounds better than what I'm doing right now. But when things are going well, you go, well, gosh, is it the right time to leave? I mean, well, what if I leave and it's not as good? Like, am I shooting myself in the foot here? And that was your situation, right? You were in a great spot. I mean, I forget the exact award, but I mean, you were getting the jacket, the suit
Yeah,
jacket,
yeah, yeah.
recognitions. Things are going really well, but an opportunity presented itself that you thought was intriguing, exciting, and had additional capacity. So, talk a little bit about, that decision making process and really what that looks like for you in making that transitionary type of a choice.
Yeah, it was the decision that was made after a really long time of kind of weighing out pros and cons, weighing out, professionally what was going to be the best move from a family standpoint. I've got two little girls. What was going to be the best thing for our family? I keep going back to, everything worthwhile comes with sacrifice. My time at Franchise Fastlane was awesome. I worked with great people, great leaders. I learned a ton. I feel like I got a PhD in franchising in about 3, 4 years. And now I'm able to take all that information and go represent my clients and help them find life-changing opportunities through franchising. But one of the things that really kept coming back to me was time. It was family and time. And the role that I was in required a lot of travel. It's just the nature of the beast. And I would tell my wife all the time, we talk about it like, if it was easy, everybody would do it.
Yep.
And it's not. And I've done it for a long time, but I had an opportunity that I felt like was as good or better than the opportunity that I was currently in at my previous employer. And so, I spent months talking to people. I spent months vetting out the leadership team at the new company that I'm at now at FranPath, and just making sure that everything aligned. But at the end of the day, there was some fear. There was some nerves. I was leaving what was pretty much a sure thing for something that wasn't a sure thing. But it was a situation that, I talk to my clients all the time about this, and I talk to people when I was in franchising development. There will be fear before you sign a franchise agreement and before you invest 200,000, 300,000, $400,000 into a business. There's going to be fear and there's going to be nerves. And those nerves are a good thing, because if you're not nervous, it doesn't mean enough to you. And I
Yep.
always relate it back to when I was coaching. It's like players get nervous before big games or games in general. I used to get nervous for every game. It didn't matter who we were playing
Yeah.
because it mattered to me because of all the work that I had put in leading up to that game. I wanted to perform at a high level.
Good.
And some players, and some business owners, those nerves, it's kind of paralysis by or analysis by paralysis,
Yeah.
or I guess opposite of that. But the same thing goes with my move. Is there were nerves, there was some fear, but at the end of the day, I knew that I had prepared. I knew I had the conversations. I knew I had the information needed to make a good decision, and it's been a great decision for my family and for myself.
I love it. Well, we'll end with this then. Uh, you and your wife, two kiddos, a little bit about how you guys met.
Yeah. So we met through mutual friends. I was teaching at Papillion La Vista South. One of my really good buddies was teaching at Papillion La Vista High. His girlfriend at the time was really good friends with my wife now. They were in the same sorority together, so they kind of matched us up, and and it was a good fit. She's awesome though. She's been so supportive, and just my I mean, I'm very professionally driven. She's been so supportive in kind of all the things that I've jumped into, whether it be coaching, whether it be franchising, and now she's able to stay at home with the two girls and kind of help raise them and do what they need from a day-to-day standpoint. But yeah, we met through mutual friends.
I love it. Well, Jake, I appreciate you, brother, and just sharing your journey and all the amazing things you've done. And we'll look forward to, staying in contact. And I know probably 5 years from now we'll be doing this, talking about new franchises and all the growth that you've had.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, Phil. It's been great.